Chapter 9, His Last Chance, covering the years 1930 to 1932. As William Branham entered his 20s, he quite by accident stumbled upon a way to pick up extra cash. One day he borrowed a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. While he was speeding down a gravel road, he lost control of the machine and went skidding into a ditch in front of a training camp for boxers. Several men saw the accident and ran across the road to see if he was hurt. Fortunately, Billy was not seriously injured, but he felt too shaken to get up and ride away, so the men invited him to come inside and watch a few fights until he felt better. Just as Billy walked in the room, one of the trainers, a man named George 6 Smith, opened the door of a bird cage. Out flew a canary, darting around the room so fast that Smith couldn't catch it. But when the bird zipped past Billy's head, Billy snatched it out of mid-air. 6 Smith whistled in admiration. "I've never seen such quick hands in all my life. Young man, have you ever considered prize fighting?" That offhand remark got Billy thinking about prize fighting, and soon he was spending much of his free time training for the sport, running 7 to 8 miles a day, then showing up at training camp where he would pound away at a punching bag until some boxer would ask him to fight with him in the ring. Watching Billy spar, 6 Smith was soon more impressed with Billy's determination than with his speed. The trainer spent many hours with Billy, teaching him proper footwork, hand moves, and most important of all, how to take the beating from another fighter without collapsing. George Smith got his nickname after his first professional fight when he knocked out his opponent in 6 seconds flat. Smith was about 8 years older than Billy, about 35 pounds heavier, and was the roughest man he had ever met in his life. The first time Billy climbed into the ring with his trainer, 6 thrashed him mercilessly. One time Smith hit Billy so hard that he sailed over the top of the ropes and crashed down into some folding chairs outside the ring. Billy took a long time getting up. When he finally got his breath back, he said, "Six, why do you have to do me that way?" Smith laughed and said, "This kind of sparring will do you the most good." "Do me good? How can it do me any good? You're just about killing me." "Look, Billy, I don't care how physically fit you are. Any time you're hit, it shocks your system and stops the flow of blood to the heart. In boxing, you have to learn how to take a hard punch and come right back. If your body is not used to coming back quick, you'll lay there and take the count. But if you're used to it, even if you're knocked down, you'll get right back up again. So that's the way I train. You might not like me now, but you'll appreciate me when you get into competition." Billy climbed back into the ring and continued. Eventually, he gained such control over himself that 6 Smith could punch him in the stomach hard enough to slam him against the ropes, and it wouldn't bother Billy a bit. He was ready to keep fighting. As soon as he could last 8 to 10 rounds in sparring practice, he started fighting in Golden Gloves amateur boxing competition. Billy thrived on the ring. Whether just sparring or fighting for a prize, he gave it everything he had. Boxing released his emotions. The anger and confusion bottled up in him for so long fired his arms like shotgun blasts. His speed and determination carried him to one victory after another. Each triumph sparked more praise, and Billy's self-confidence soared. Never before had he experienced such recognition, such acceptance. He began to feel like he was somebody important. Boxing as an amateur, he never lost a fight. After a year in Golden Gloves competition, he turned professional. He won 15 professional matches in a row, including a regional bantamweight championship, which included boxers from 3 states. By now, he thought he was unbeatable. Then one night, he met his match. He was scheduled to fight Bill Pritchard, a championship boxer from West Virginia. The match was being held in Evansville, Indiana. Billy Branham drove to Evansville with his friend Howard McLean, a welterweight boxer who also had a match that evening. They ate dinner at 3 in the afternoon, then started walking back to the arena so they could rest a while before they had their hands wrapped for their fights. Billy was wearing a blue suit. He pulled a comb from his pocket and ran it through his thick, dark hair. Howard looked over at his companion and whistled. "You know, Billy, you look like a little Baptist preacher." Billy flushed with anger. He was always touchy about insults, and in his mind the word preacher was the same as sissy. "Wait a minute, Howard. You better smile when you say that." Billy spread his legs and raised his fists. Even though Howard outweighed him by 30 pounds, Billy was ready to take him on. But Howard laughed, insisting it was only a joke, so Billy's fists came down. That night in the ring, Billy was surprised by the strength and speed of his opponent. Pritchard smashed into him with a fury that Billy could not equal. For the first time in his boxing career, Billy felt unsure of himself. Early into the match, when he first realized he was in trouble, he was still hoping he could fight Pritchard to a draw. But as the fight progressed and Billy absorbed repeated blows, he began to wonder if Pritchard was going to kill him. Toward the end of the fight, Billy was resting on his stool between rounds. He looked up at the ceiling and prayed silently, "God, if you will let me come through this alive, I promise you I'll quit boxing." After that night, Billy never climbed into a boxing ring again. One day in the fall of 1931, Billy was repairing meters at the New Albany Gas Works. While testing for leaks, the fumes overcame his senses, and he slumped to the floor. The after effects of this accident bothered him constantly. His head ached, his vision blurred, he had trouble eating, his stomach turned sour and ached whenever food touched it, and his digestive acids came up his throat to burn his mouth. His employer, Public Service Indiana, paid for him to visit several medical specialists in Louisville, Kentucky, but these doctors had difficulty isolating his problem. After repeated examinations, they finally guessed he had appendicitis. That surprised Billy because the pain localized in his stomach, not his side. But the specialists convinced him that the poisoning from the gas had merely confused the search, masking the symptoms of appendicitis. They insisted his appendix was inflamed and had to come out. Reluctantly, Billy agreed to let them operate, but only if he used a local anesthetic. He had terrifying memories of his operation at age 14 when his legs had been mangled by that shotgun blast. At that time, he almost did not come out from under the anesthesia, and he could never forget that horrible experience when he was floating down through the regions of the lost and drifting souls. The darkness, the mist, the loneliness, and those hideous faces. He never wanted to see that place again. Nervous and scared, Billy wanted someone near him during the operation who knew how to pray, so he asked the minister from the local First Baptist Church to stand by him. The appendix was successfully removed, and Billy was wheeled back to his room. Lying fully conscious in his hospital bed, Billy felt his pulse getting weaker by the minute. He tried to contact the nurse, but his voice was a whisper and his arms were too weak to move. His breathing became shallow. His heartbeat slowed until it scarcely beat at all. He thought, "Is this death? Am I going?" The light in his room dimmed. The walls blurred and took on shadowy shapes like trees. It seemed to be in a cold, dark forest. Somewhere off in the distance he could hear a wind blowing. Faint at first. The noise slowly increased, coming his way. Billy's mind roused with panic. "This is it! This is death coming to take me!" He tried to pray, but he could not find words. Closer and closer the wind came until the limbs of the trees around him shook with its force. Then everything changed. The dark woods suddenly disappeared, and Billy found himself standing in the shadow of a huge silver poplar. It was the same tree he had avoided ever since it had scared him so badly as a boy. The air felt static and oppressive, like a day with 99% humidity. The sound of the rustling leaves turned Billy's eyes upward. He saw that same whirlwind circling in the upper branches, heard that same deep voice say, "Don't ever drink or smoke or defile your body in any way. I called you, and you would not go." Billy's mind snapped back to that day so many years before when this voice had said, "There's a work for you to do when you get older." Now the voice repeated its accusation, "I called you, and you would not go." Billy felt terrified. Had he missed the reason for his life? Was it too late? Frantically he asked aloud, "Who called, and who are you? And what did you want me to do?" The voice repeated a third time, "I called you, and you would not go." Billy cried out, "Jesus, if that is you, let me go back again to earth, and I will preach your gospel from the housetops and street corners. I'll tell everyone about it." In an instant, Billy was back in his hospital bed. His heart beat strong and his lungs drew deep. He was going to live. The surgeon standing by his bed was noticeably surprised to see Billy's cheeks flushed red and his strength return so quickly. Turning to Charles and Ella Branham, he commented, "I'm not a church-going man. My practice is so large I haven't had time. But I know God has visited this boy." Out of necessity, Billy returned to work as soon as his stitches could stand the stress. Unfortunately, the operation did not cure any of his original symptoms. Through the winter of 1931 and 32, his condition grew steadily worse. His stomach rejected almost everything he tried to eat, forcing him to live on barley water and prune juice. Even that rested poorly. His eyes developed astigmatism, and he couldn't see without thick glasses. Whenever he took the glasses off, his head shook so much that a barber couldn't even cut his hair. The specialists in Louisville were stumped. After a battery of examinations, one doctor said, "Mr. Branham, I'm afraid your condition is hopeless. Your stomach is one big knot of sores. You will have to eat a strict, soft diet the rest of your life. Never forget that, because one mouthful of solid food will kill you." Billy returned home sick and depressed, but at least he was alive. Now he was determined to find God so that he could keep his promise. He began reading through the Bible in earnest. The further he read, the more encouraged he grew. He could actually identify with some of the experiences he was reading about, such as when men and women heard the voice of God speaking directly to them. Could that have been God speaking to him out of that poplar tree when he was a boy? He had suspected it was, but was never completely convinced until he read where God spoke to Job out of a whirlwind. That convinced him. Then, as he plunged into the lives of Jesus, Peter, and Paul, Billy Branham burned with excitement. Here were explanations for those strange trance-like states he experienced, where he would be wide awake and suddenly find that he was somewhere else, seeing something take place that looked as real as the shoes on his feet. The Bible called them visions. Maybe his life wasn't so strange after all. Maybe it was just God dealing with him. Billy started visiting different churches in the area, asking how he might encounter God. But instead of finding general agreement and a clear-cut path, he found conflicting opinions which fostered confusion. The First Baptist Church wanted to put his name on their church registry, and they would give him a letter of acceptance. The Lutherans wanted him to attend confirmation classes. The Catholics said he needed to acknowledge the Pope as the supreme authority of God on earth and attend Mass every Sunday. The Seventh-day Adventists told him he needed to observe Saturday as the Sabbath. Each church felt it had a monopoly on truth, to the exclusion of the rest. Billy didn't know what to do. He had no idea where to find God. Then he thought, I seen him in nature. I think I'll go talk to him out in the woods. He hiked to one of his favorite hunting spots, but it didn't help. He didn't know what to say, and he felt silly talking when there did not seem to be anyone there to listen. Then he got an idea. Why not write God a letter? It seemed like a good plan. So he wrote, "Dear Sir, I know you pass down this path here because I sit here squirrel hunting, and I know you come by. I want you. Would you come talk with me sometime? I want to tell you something. Billy Branham." Tacking this letter to a tree, Billy went home, figuring he would return later to see if anything positive had come of it. But the next day he had some doubts, thinking, "Now, wait a minute. I never seen anybody out there in the woods. Besides, if God is everywhere, then I should be able to reach him in town just as easily as in the country. But that brings me around again to my original problem. I want to talk to God, but I don't know how I'm going to do it." He went to the old shed behind the house and shut the door. The inside of the shed dripped with moisture from a rain the night before. Ignoring the damp earth, Billy knelt beside a wrecked Model T Ford. His mind was glued to his purpose. Desperate to speak with his Creator, he muttered, "Now, how do I do this? I've seen pictures of people praying, and I believe they put their hands like this." He put his hands together, flat, in front of him in the classic pose of prayer. "Now, what am I going to say? There's some way you have to do this, and I don't know what it is." He decided the only way he was going to get anywhere was to blunder ahead and try. "Dear sir, I wish that you would come and speak with me just a moment. I want to tell you how bad I am." He stopped to listen. The shed remained perfectly quiet. "Maybe I was supposed to put my hands like this." He interlocked his fingers and tried again. "Dear sir, I don't know just exactly how to do this, but I trust you'll understand. Will you help me?" He stopped again to listen. Nothing. By this time his self-restraint broke down completely. Tears flooded his eyes as he gushed, "Sir, even if you don't talk to me, I'm going to talk to you anyhow. Mr. God, I'm no good. I'm ashamed of myself. I'm sorry I've neglected you all these years. But now I want you. Please come talk to me." Suddenly his body felt strange. When he opened his eyes, he lifted his head. A chill of fear shot up his spine. Floating in front of him was a brilliant amber light, forming a perfect cross in the air. Out of the depths of its energy came a voice speaking in a language like none Billy had ever heard before. Then it vanished. Billy stayed on his knees, breathless and numb, unable to move. Finally he mustered the strength to say, "Sir, I don't understand your language, but I gather I'm supposed to be reckoned somewhere in that cross, and my sins are supposed to lay in there. If you will forgive me, then just come back and talk in your language again. If you can't talk in my language, I'll understand by that." The cross appeared again, radiant with heat and light. Billy closed his eyes and stretched out his arms. He experienced a peculiar sensation that felt like warm raindrops were pelting his body. Suddenly he felt peaceful and free, as though 100-pound load had been lifted off his shoulders. When he opened his eyes, the light was gone. Thrilled to overflowing, Billy ran from the shed and burst into the house. Startled, his mother asked, "Billy, what's wrong? Are you nervous?" "No, ma'am. Something wonderful just happened." "What is it?" "I don't know, but I feel so good." He dashed back outside, looking for a channel to release his joy. A railroad track ran behind their house. Billy scrambled up the embankment and ran down the track, stopping now and then to jump in the air and punch with his fists, shadowboxing to vent his feelings. At last, at long last, he had found God in the cross of Jesus Christ. A few days later, Ella said, "Billy, I had a dream about you last night. I saw you standing on a white cloud preaching to all the world." That struck Billy as very peculiar, because his mother almost never dreamed.